Well, I think he's referring to specifically the outburst after the Leeds game. I think that made his position untenable. At a very basic level, he had been given an extraordinary level of backing at every level, but most notably by the new controlling shareholder, Jim Ratcliffe, who had not only said he was a great manager, but had more or less said you've got a job for 3 years. And Tim, I'm sure you agree with me that we all raised our eyebrows at that because it's not really the way football works. It felt like a rather well-intentioned but bold statement. But I think if you've given that level of backing and then with a bit of criticism, your manager turns on you and your management team, I think that would have infuriated Jim Ratcliffe. And I think it would have been an extremely quick decision to say, right, you're out. Because the results, we all know that a 32% win record, that gets you in trouble at the bottom half of the Premier League. But at Manchester United, it's totally wrong. So it was untenable to keep him. And I don't think it was planned. And I think that has serious implications for where the club is with Darren and for the rest of the season, because I don't think they were planning to fire Ruben Amorim over Christmas 2025. And now we're entering a transfer window. They're in an extremely interesting position shooting for 5th place, which probably gets you Champions League this year. And they're in a shootout with Chelsea for that position. That's my honest opinion, looking at the table. I think 3 clubs are ahead. Liverpool look like they're improving. But there's a real golden opportunity to make Champions League. And I think they've got to think about that really carefully right now, because missing that opportunity will have real implications in the summer for their ability to recruit coaches and players. So
it sounds like to me you're saying that just even having Darren Fletcher as an interim head coach, that sounds like a risk to you.
Well, I think it is a risk. And look, I'm a complete traditionalist, and I feel culturally it's right for Manchester United to embrace their traditions, their values, what made that club great. I believe passionately that a club has to have that heart and soul. But they also need to have relevant experience, particularly under pressure at the top end. And I think a club of Manchester United's stature probably wouldn't naturally make Darren Fletcher, from his current position, first-team manager on a permanent basis. I don't think they're suggesting they will. But if you're making him manager for the rest of the season, you are in effect putting a completely inexperienced manager up against other clubs who are fighting with you for Champions League football. And you're doing it because you want to have a shot, Vicky, at a much more broad talent pool in the summer of available managers out of contract. Let's call them A-list managers. Your Tuchels, your Pochettinos, your Ancelottis, your Glasners and your Iriolas in the Premier League. I can see why you'd want to have a look at those guys. The problem is, if this season goes wrong from right now until the end, and you're not in the Champions League, 1, that may make you less attractive to those managers, and 2, you may not have the financial wherewithal to do it, because that's a 70, 80 million hole in your revenue, earnings and cash. So I think joining those dots, I'd be looking today and saying, is there a permanent option today that fits our culture, fits our playing style, we believe we can back to the hilt, and then think about going and getting them? Because I think about it, if it was a player, you don't take a chance on an auction in the summer if you can buy a player today. You're just giving other clubs the chance to compete with you. So I personally think they need to think very carefully about that.
Sounds like good advice. Let's talk through what happens when relationships break down. Tell us what happens behind the scenes, because it's reported that there was a meeting between Amorim and United's Director of Football, Jason Wilcox, and that's accelerated this parting. So what happens when these relationships turn sour?
Well, again, it sounds like a very technical football point, but it's actually a point about human relations, and it would be the case in any work environment that, firstly, I think there are natural conflicts between the sporting director role and the head coach role. And that conflict centres on the fact that there are different priorities. Fundamentally, the head coach or manager, it's not really about title, it's about what you do. The head coach or manager is responsible ultimately for on-field results week in, week out, and gets judged and criticised and praised in equal measure for how that's going. The sporting director in the modern structure, and it's evolved significantly since I came into the game. 17 years ago, English football was still very much in the heyday of Sir Alex Ferguson. For over 100 years, we had the cult of managers. Managers ran football clubs, and they certainly ran everything that touched football in a football club, which included recruitment, getting rid of players, signing players, bringing players through. And the sporting director, the evolution of the sporting director, I think has changed that dynamic. I think that's a smart thing. I think it would be impossible for a modern day manager to oversee all of recruitment day in, day out. But it does mean that a key part of football success, the players joining and leaving a club, impacting on results week in, week out, has been taken away from the manager, and yet they're judged on that. And I think it's therefore human nature that when a manager is copping flack week after week for results, and he's thinking, they haven't got me the players I asked them to get. I didn't particularly like all the players I inherited when I got here. I think we need to strengthen in the window, and I'm being told we can't. I'm just gonna be honest to our fan base, our general public, that this isn't all on me. And the problem with that, Vicky, is I think it's very understandable how it happens, particularly when results are going very badly, particularly in high-profile clubs. The problem with that is once it happens, it's done. Because Tim and I know, you go into a training ground on a Monday morning, sporting directors' offices in every club I've been at is about 5 metres from the manager's office. They're supposed to work well together.
Yeah.
As the CEO, I will probably join them on a Monday. We'll have morning coffee, talk about the weekend, plan the week. If you walk into a meeting with someone who the previous day has said to the national media, you're doing a terrible job, you can't work anymore.
No.
So those relations breaking down are fatal. And so how do you avoid that? I think it's really important that when you, and this is really for Jim Ratcliffe, I think, really, this is, you know, if I'm setting up a club as an owner or as a chief executive, I need to make sure that those relationships are balanced. The people in that relationship, the sporting director, the coach in particular, and the chief executive, they are all of comparable stature, quality, experience, and their crucial words, Vicky, mutual trust and respect. And I think if you have those relationships where maybe somebody comes in who wasn't there at the start, maybe a manager who wasn't hired by a sporting director, or the other way round, it can cause problems. Because when results don't go well, the tendency is for the blame game to creep in.
We'll talk at length, because I know you're training to become a sporting director. We'll talk a little bit later on about the role of a sporting director in the show. But is this setup that's going on behind the scenes likely to put off maybe incoming managers? Do you feel, is that something that you would worry about as a player, that actually everything that's going on at Manchester United might be off-putting for a really high-calibre manager to come in and sort out?
Yes and no. I mean, Manchester United is still one of the best clubs in the world. So to get an opportunity to manage that club is, I think a lot of people will walk there.
I agree.
So, but I think it's just clear. It's about, there's always egos involved. But if the owner and the CEO make a clear understanding where the clarity is, the transparency is, and who makes the decisions, we're all in it in the same boat here, and we all want the same results. And I think this is where there's a lot of friction there, and people wanting to be the boss. Ultimately, the manager's going to get the flack, but everybody has to understand they have to take some responsibility. Do
you just very briefly, do you find that hard as a player, though, if everything's going on and your manager's coming under flack, but actually there's a lot of situations that he's got to deal with as well? Is that hard as a player to sort of navigate? I
mean, the changing room is a funny place. We all read and see the interviews, and clearly if your manager is the first one to throw in the towel, that's going to rip through your changing room and the confidence. Yeah. If your leader, your captain of your ship is gone, then clearly that's going to has a massive impact. So yes, the changing room, clearly we are there to do a job. So 3 o'clock on a Saturday, whatever goes out the window, nobody cares if you had a bad night's sleep or your manager is not really behind you. You need to perform, and I think that's why we are the professionals as football players.
Man United, Vicky, is a very specific beast. It's the most high-profile club, I think, in the world, certainly in this country. And so these issues get picked at from the outside, and they're most vulnerable when results are miles off expectations. And I think that's been at the heart of what's gone wrong here. So I think next time round, it's absolutely crucial that this unity, this trust, this confidence is ingrained from day one. And it will help if Jason Wilcox and Jim and Omar Barada, you know, they're making their selection, and that person will know that everybody's there. Don't forget, you know, there was a very unexpected departure of Dan Ashworth before all this happened. And I think that destabilised the management structure because he was a highly experienced sporting director, and I think he might have handled things differently.
Yeah, someone you know well about.